Hey, Linda. Linda, you want to do a sound check real quick on the lectern?
Good morning. Whether you're participating online or here in person, we say welcome home to Live Oak Unitarian Universalist Church. My name is Linda McCullough, and I'm so glad you're here. For our guests, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to the Live Oak weekly newsletter. It's the go-to page to know where everything is happening here. There's a link on our homepage. Thanks to all for your continued care in following the current guidelines for in-person service so we can provide as safe an environment as possible during what remains a challenging time. Masking is mandatory inside for everyone over age 2. But with your mask on, you will be invited once again to lift your voice up in song. We've done a lot of pivoting as we've adapted to changing pandemic guidelines, and we appreciate your patience and sense of humor as we experiment and adjust. And now, here at home, let us light our chalices. Our chalice lighting reading is by Molly Brewer. My beloved people, I cannot pretend, and so I will not tell you that everything is okay right now, that there is no reason to be angry, that you must be optimistic or at peace. I cannot pretend these things, and so I won't tell them to you. But now our chalice is lit, and so all I ask in this moment is that we remember the words of Rebecca Parker. There is a love. There is a love holding us. There is a love holding all. By the light of our chalice, let us rest in this love. Now, our opening hymn is number 108, My Life Flows On Like an Endless Song. Please rise either in body or spirit and join us in singing.
Flows on in endless song above earth's lamentation. I hear the real, though far off hymn that tells a new creation. Through all the tumult and the strife, I hear the music ringing. It sounds an echo in my soul. How can I keep from singing? What though the tempest around me roars? I know the truth, it's vivid. What though the darkness around me close? Songs in the night it's giveth. No storm can shake my inmost calm, while to the rock I'm clinging, since love prevails in heaven and earth. How can I keep from singing?
Every week when we gather, we share pieces of our lives with each other. We share our sorrows so that we may offer comfort to one another, and we share our joys so that we may celebrate together. Please share in the chat box any joys or sorrows you are carrying today. Reverend Joanna shares a joy. We're setting our new music director in his office after church today. We could use help. Pizza, lunch, provided. Yay. And Mary Hengstebeck shares her concern for ESL's Ukrainian students with relatives in Ukraine and former students who are in Ukraine right now. In this religious community, we hold with reverence the knowledge that each week a multitude of different emotions and experiences are brought together into this space. One of us may be celebrating, one weeping, one filled with determination, one with despair. This mosaic of experiences is holy, and we honor all with our witness. And now for our big idea.
All right, so funny enough, today's big idea is called Kamala and Maya's Big Idea. And if the name sounds familiar, it is by Mina Harris, which is Madam Vice President's niece. We'll see if I can get this figured out, actually. Yeah, maybe not. Okay, there we go. Why is it? The other way? Okay. There we go. Okay. Thank you for your patience. You know what should be out there? Kamala asked her sister Maya. Us? Said Maya. A slide, said Kamala. And a swing, Maya added. A playground, they shouted together. Kamala and Maya had an idea. It was a very good idea, and a very big idea. They were going to need help. Wouldn't it be great if there was a playground in the courtyard? Maya said. That does sound nice, Mommy agreed. How can we make that happen? Kamala asked. Well, I suppose the first step would be to ask the landlord, the person who owns the building. So Kamala wrote a letter and Maya drew a picture, and they went to see the landlord to discuss their idea. The landlord thought about it for less than a second. I don't think so, no. That was not the answer they wanted, but they weren't ready to give up. That night, the sisters tried to think of ways to turn a no into a yes. They asked the other kids in the building if they wanted a playground in the courtyard. Did they? Of course they did, and they had ideas too. Let's have a teeter-totter, and a basketball hoop, and flowers. So Kamala wrote a longer letter, and they went to see the landlord together. The landlord thought about it for less than 5 seconds. A project this big is expensive. We don't have the money for that. Do your parents know you're here? This was not the answer they wanted, but Kamala was not ready to give up. If we ask our parents and do it all ourselves, can we fix up the courtyard? The landlord thought about that for a whole 10 seconds. Finally, he shrugged. If you can do it yourselves, sure. This wasn't exactly the answer they wanted, but it was a start. The kids all spoke to their parents about their ideas for the courtyard. They hung up posters and knocked on neighbors' doors. But they got the same answers from everyone. I'm sorry. Wow, that is a big job. Wish I could help. Which they knew meant no, no, no. But then Mr. Green stopped to talk. I work construction and I could maybe get some scrap lumber and some sand for a sandbox. Really? Kamala said. Yes, exclaimed Maya. Okay, I'll try. It wasn't a yes, but right now maybe was the sweetest word they had ever heard. Maybe gave them hope. The next weekend, maybe turned into yes. The kids all helped measure and Mr. Green cut the boards. Then they sanded and hammered and sanded some more. Then came the actual sand. They were all thanking Mr. Green when Miss Lopez stopped to talk. I work at a garage. Maybe they have an extra tire for a teeter-totter. Another maybe. In the weeks that followed, lots of I don't knows turned into maybes and then yeses. No one could do everything, but everyone could do something. Kamala and Maya wanted everyone to celebrate the new playground, so they made another big poster inviting their neighbors to a potluck party. There were hot dogs and hummus, spicy chicken and potato salad, strawberries and brownies and lemonade. Mrs. Flores set up a sprinkler for the kids to run through. Mr. Green brought the music. Kamala admired the new playground, but she noticed there was still one thing missing. No one knew how to make a slide, but Ms. Flores knew where they might buy one. I teach at Emerson Elementary, and they are redoing their playground. Maybe we could buy the old slide? This was a different kind of maybe. How can we afford that maybe? But now everyone was trying to find a way to turn that maybe into a yes. These brownies are delicious. Maybe we could have a bake sale? We can all bring toys and books and have a sidewalk sale. No one could do everything, but everyone could contribute something. When the slide arrived at last, Maya and Kamala got the first ride. The landlord was impressed. "I want to shake your hands, girls," he said. "You did a good job. You all did a good job." Kamala and Maya had an idea. It was a very good idea, and a very big idea. And, with a lot of help, they made it happen. Hooray for Kamala and Maya! Hooray for the Purr sisters! What's next, Kamala? Kamala, looking up, said, "I'm wondering what the view is like from the roof." And that is the end. And that is supposedly based on a true story that she heard from her mom and her aunt.
Every week, we engage in the spiritual practice of generosity, combining our resources to support the ministries of the church. Part of our mission is to empower dreams, and this Sunday we will be sharing the offering with Any Baby Can to help empower their dreams to strengthen families and help children have better lives. We now invite you to go to liveoakuu.org and click on Donate.
Good morning, Live Oak. Oh, too hot. Today is the final Sunday of the annual month-long celebration of Black History. You might be surprised, but the hymn I'm going to sing is not a hymn I grew up singing. It was my first year of undergrad at UT when I sang Lift Every Voice and Sing, or more widely known as the Negro National Anthem, for the first time. The soaring melody, rich harmonies, repetition, and multiple prolonged notes were, too notable for me to recognize if I had sung it before, so I was pretty sure I hadn't. Unsurprisingly, I also had never learned of James Weldon Johnson, a lawyer, professor, civil rights activist, U.S. consul, and Harlem Renaissance poet, who actually wrote the words to this hymn. Or his younger brother, John Rosamond Johnson, who wrote the music to the hymn. The Black History Month celebration overall has only lasted a total of 52 years, and I think it's a little ridiculous how we try to fit all of Black history within 1 month, and I literally said, let me remind us all, February is the shortest month, even with an extra day sometimes. Black history is U.S. history. Our education and music education should reflect this. Black creators have more to offer than a month's amount of time can provide, because Black creators are still creating as I speak. I believe the efforts like Representative Jim Clyburn, who is proposing a measure he did this month, February 2022, to entitle Lift Every Voice and Sing as the national hymn for the United States. And here is Lift Every Voice and Sing, sung in the way that I learned it. Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun, let us march on till victory is won. Stony the road we trod, bitter the chastening rod, felt in the days when hope unborn had died. Yet with a steady beat have not our weary feet come to the place for which our fathers sighed. We have come treading our way o'er trades through the watered. We have come treading our path through the blood of the slaughtered. Out from the gloomy past, till now we stand at last, where the white gleam of our bright star is cast. God of our wearies, God of our silent tears, thou who hast brought us thus far on the way, thou who hast by thy might led us into the light, keep us forever in the path we pray, lest our feet stray from the places, our God, where we met thee, lest our hearts, drunk with the wine of the world, we forget thee. Shadowed beneath thy hand, may we forever stand, true to our God, true to our native land.
Well, that brought tears to my eyes. I don't know about you. Today we have a special service with members of our social justice team sharing issues that will help to build the beloved community in our little corner of the world. They are Joel Bercu, Chris Milhealsick, Judy Reynolds, and Audrey McCann.
Good morning, Live Oak, my beloved community. By the way, I want to just say real quick, it's so great to have Curtis as part of our beloved community as well. That was really fabulous. So I'm the first of the 4 speakers that are going to be talking about beloved community today. And I'm going to be talking a little bit about public education as well. You know, I respect the interdependent web of existence for which we all are a part. That's number 7 of our UUA values, lucky number 7. And how do we do this? Well, I think public education makes that interdependent web strong. Through education, we can make society better. Part of our existence is how to discern information, especially in today's society where there's so much misinformation that's out there. We need critical thinking skills to understand what is truth and what is fiction. More critical thinking will result in diversity of thought, which is needed in our community. I believe that all individuals deserve the opportunity to learn. Education is a human right. It's not a privilege. Books grow the mind. And understanding history will help us shape for a better tomorrow. The challenge that we have facing us today is that our school systems are under attack. It's done through seeding doubt in the public school system through things like misinformation and, frankly, lies. This is really, in my opinion, a virus that needs to be treated. Even if you don't have if you don't have kids in public school, I think this is something that you still need to keep your eye on. If the web of existence breaks, we'll all fall. Now, it's important to stand up for public education, but really, how do you do that? Well, I've got 4 simple things that you could probably do. First of all, when you vote, and we're going to be talking about voting in just a second, you need to vote for leaders that support public education. A lot of our leaders right now in Texas are attacking public education, and we frankly need to have people who encourage public education out there. Find out information on your local school board members and find out how they feel about public education. I can tell you in my system, Leander ISD, we actually have 5 public school board seats open. And so this could be a real turning point for public education within Leander ISD, so it's really important to watch out for that. The third thing that you can do is go to school board meetings, whether or not you speak or not. Right now, there's a lot of negativity that's going on in these school board meetings, but it's important to spread a positive message. Tell your teachers and educators they're doing a good job, your school board members, that they're doing a good job. Create a culture of positivity moving forward. In fact, in a lot of other school districts right now, there's been a lot of resignations from superintendents and school board members just because of this negativity. So we really need to support them. And then number 4, support your teachers, support the school staff, like bus drivers, cafeteria workers, etc. Right now, we're in a culture where a lot of school staff is actually hard to find good people nowadays. People are resigning, frankly. And we need to encourage that, whether or not it's through encouraging a good living wage for school staff, or just saying thank you for all the service that they do every day. So in my opinion, education is the cornerstone to an open mind and a better future. We, as UUs, need to water the seeds of public education so our kids can grow as better citizens for a better tomorrow. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Chris Milhealsick. Thanks. Thank you, Joel, for your inspiring message. I am Chris Milhealsick. I'm the leader of our environmental awareness team, which has been meeting for about a year and a half now. Our focus this year is environmental justice, and I'm going to be talking today about how climate justice impacts our community. Climate change science says we're starting to see and live through more extreme weather events that are directly linked to a warming planet. More heat waves, stronger and more catastrophic droughts, more flooding, and yes, even more extreme cold events. While we don't tend to think of cold events as related to global warming, the science is actually pretty clear. Warmer temperatures lead to a weaker jet stream, allowing dips of Arctic air into areas that normally don't get such frigid weather. We saw a stark example of the chaos and human misery that climate change-induced weather events can cause just last year with our winter ice storm. The power outages, lack of running water, and even deaths that occurred in our local area from just a 6-day temporary weather event highlight our need as a community to recognize and prepare for the impacts of climate change, and to realize that these impacts are not evenly distributed throughout our community. The intersection of environmentalism and human rights issues, where many climate change issues fall, is termed environmental justice. The impacts of extreme weather events, rising seas, and huge wildfires fall on people often the least able to deal with them, economically disadvantaged and often communities of color. Additionally, the people most impacted by climate change are often not the people most responsible. The overconsumption of resources and the associated carbon emissions that drive climate change are a product of affluent lifestyles. Elizabeth Amons, a literature and environmental justice professor at Tufts University, says, environmental harm and hazards created by overconsumption of resources in the global north and by elites worldwide fall disproportionately on the world's poor, the vast majority of whom are people of color, especially children. Environmental justice seeks to make these facts visible and bring people together to work for positive, significant change. But within this gloomy reality, there's also hope, a lot of hope. Last year during the ice storm, it didn't take long for our Live Oak community to organize around what we could do to help and run drive-by water and food pickup for those in our congregation and local community most impacted by the storm. What might it look like to be more resilient, more connected, better able to support each other when these extreme weather events upend the lives of our Live Oak community and our surrounding neighborhood community? Our UU's second principle calls us to justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. What might this look like through an environmental or climate justice lens? Additionally, climate justice isn't only about responding compassionately and equitably to disasters, but also about reducing our consumption and greenhouse gas emissions in the first place. Could we as a community do more to thwart climate change? The environmental awareness team is starting to investigate what it might look like to become a UU certified green sanctuary. The stated mission outcome of the Green Sanctuary 2030 program is a Unitarian Universalist culture that is characterized by bold, collaborative, urgent, effective action to mitigate the climate crisis, build resilience and adaptation to climate change, and secure environmental and climate justice. Pretty bold words and a lofty ambition. But the urgency of climate change has indeed reached crisis levels. What will our community do to help?
Hi, I'm Judy Reynolds, and I'm going to talk briefly about the importance of voting, and believe me, I could talk a lot longer than 5 minutes. We can have an impact on social issues by voting for policies and policymakers that support them. There's a voting rights team forming now at Live Oak. The main goals of this group are to register, inform, and motivate voters. All of our efforts at Live Oak will be nonpartisan in order not to jeopardize our tax status. Our target goal is to be a 100% voting congregation, which we may already be. But more than that, we want to reach out to get out the vote in our wider communities. Future activities might include working with Fair Maps, advocating for online registration, mail-in voting for all, and more. Here's the scope of the problem we want to work on, which has been exacerbated by new voter suppression measures. In the 2020 presidential election, the voter turnout was celebrated as the highest that it's been in 120 years. However, only 2/3 of eligible voters cast ballots. For some reason or another, 1/3 of the voters in the United States did not vote. In Texas, in 2018, the gubernatorial election, 80% of eligible voters were registered in Texas. There's still room for improvement there, but only 53% of that group voted, which I figure means that about only probably less than half the voters in Texas chose our current leadership team. As Thomas Jefferson said, we don't have government by the majority, we have government by the majority that participate. Right now, we can all be encouraging voters by talking about voting with our family, friends, neighbors, and colleagues. Young people can talk about voting too, even though they're not 18 yet. You can talk about why voting is important and why you look forward to voting when you're 18. Voting is essential for democracy to function. Supporting democracy is a UU principle. It's our duty, obligation, and responsibility as citizens to vote. And voting is also our right, which for many of us was won by the struggle and sacrifice of others before us. When I register voters, there's always someone, actually more than I would like, who say one vote doesn't matter. We can remind them about the many elections we have, like for school board, state questions, county and city offices, where each of our votes has an obvious impact on our lives. My last vote was for funding for ambulance services in my emergency services district. Also, if one vote didn't matter, why are the legislatures in 19 states, including ours, trying to reduce the number of voters? They know every vote does count. And finally, this is the one that really gets me. If one eligible voter doesn't vote, they have just increased the voting power of someone who did. Remember what Jefferson said, we have government by the majority that participate. Our primary is this Tuesday. Generally, 20% of Texas voters show up. So far in Travis and Williamson County, less than 10% of the people voted early. Check vote411.org ahead of time to prepare your sample ballot. I did that, and here's mine. I was shocked that I have 40 races to consider. I'm glad, and I could print it out thanks to 411. After you vote, wear your I voted sticker on Tuesday to advertise to your communities that it's election day, and then thank your poll workers. Watch for more information and ideas about getting out the vote on the Live Oak website, in the newsletter, and in the foyer here. We hope we can all participate in getting out the vote. As Marion Wright Edelman said, democracy is not a spectator sport. Thanks.
Hard to follow that up because isn't everything affected by voting? Especially what I have to talk about. We're going to talk about reproductive justice. As probably many of you can share in this emotion, I was absolutely furious with some of the state Senate bills that passed last year that affected abortion access in Texas. And I decided to use some of that rage, instead of just being a big ball of rage, and actually turn it into something productive. So currently, we are trying to partner with an organization called Just Texas, which is an interfaith organization that supports abortion access in Texas. And we're going to try to become what is designated as a reproductive freedom congregation. And if you're interested in getting involved with that, let me know, especially if after what I have to say really speaks to you, because we are very much in the exploratory stages of this. So a few definitions to start with. Reproductive health is a resource-intensive approach to basically addressing the lack of accessibility to healthcare and education that revolves around reproductive research, services, facilities, healthcare, everything. The goal of reproductive rights is to protect the legal right to reproductive health care, especially abortion. But reproductive justice takes it a step further and looks beyond abortion. And it addresses the social inequalities that shape the lives of marginalized folks with uteruses. The term reproductive justice was actually specifically coined in 1997 by a large group of women of color. And I guess you would say, like, theory of reproductive justice continues to center Black women specifically at the heart of it. So there are 4 goals of reproductive justice. One is to be able to raise children in safe and healthy environments. Another is to have planned and healthy pregnancies. The third one is being able to end or completely avoid unwanted pregnancies. And the fourth is to have free expression of sexuality. So in order to really tackle this aspect of reproductive justice in our community, there are a few things to consider. One is that we need to be sure we're using inclusive language to talk about reproductive justice. Trans folks deserve access to reproductive health care and resources just as much as cis women. And if you've never heard the term cis before, cis refers to a person that identifies as the gender they were assigned at birth. So whenever we're talking about cis women, that means they were born a woman and they still identify as a woman. So that's the conversation that is usually had whenever we think about reproductive rights. So to put in perspective how important it is to use inclusive language, I'd like to tell a very short story. There is a Black trans man that I grew up with that I was friends with for a very long time, and he really struggled with menstrual problems to the point that he was like losing jobs because he was just in constant pain. And he was terrified to go to the doctor because he had a really difficult time finding a doctor that would actually acknowledge that he was a man and had different reproductive needs than cis women do. And by the time he actually found health care that could really meet his needs, it had gotten so bad that he had to get an emergency hysterectomy. Sorry, that makes me emotional. So basically, by leaving these people out of this conversation, we're saying that their right to reproduce doesn't matter. And that's not fair. And then another thing that we especially need to consider in Texas is how race plays a role in reproductive justice. In Texas, we have a concerning key high maternal mortality rate. So to put that into perspective, out of all industrialized countries, the United States has the highest maternal mortality rate. And it's also, in addition to that, the only country that rate is continuing to rise in 2022. In Texas, we come in last place in the country. We have the highest maternal mortality rate, and that comes in at about 18.5 deaths per 100,000 live births. Black parents specifically are disproportionately affected, accounting for only 11% of live births, but 31% of maternal deaths. So in a state that is notorious for actively undermining these people's right to vote and their right to just have access to everything, it's unsurprising that these people are overlooked in our conversations about modern healthcare and reproductive access. So what can we do as a church community here in the Austin Metro? Well, let's revisit the 4 pillars that I mentioned earlier. So the first is to provide safe and healthy environments to raise children in. This means we need to address poverty, food inequality, and homelessness because they all impact reproductive justice. All 3 of these topics are major issues, specifically that Travis and Williamson counties are actually facing in 2022. I think actually recently Reverend Joanna mentioned that I think it's 39% of Williamson County is what's considered ALICE status. So that stands for Asset limited, income constrained, and employed. So in layman's terms, these are people who are fully employed and still struggle to make ends meet to provide for their families. So our Fresh Food for All program is very, very important to provide for these families in Williamson County. And I know it's weird to think about providing food from someone as, reproductive access for someone, but just being able to take care of your children makes it easier for you to continue to have a safe and healthy family and a safe and healthy environment to raise those kids in. So second pillar is planned and healthy pregnancies. So this factor is harder to affect directly as an individual, but as Judy mentioned, voting for representatives who really live out your values and will make sure that they're prioritizing sex education in school and as well as more equitable and accessible health care will help improve the maternal mortality rate in Texas. Third, we should support the ability to end or avoid unwanted pregnancies. Our Whole Lives makes a great step toward this, but the program only affects our church community. In order to really make a difference in the community at large, we need to continue advocating for comprehensive sex education, easily accessible contraceptives, and easily acceptable abortion. So we can talk more about all of that in a few weeks. We're going to actually have a Social Justice Sunday that is focused on reproductive justice in the adult religious education. I think that's on March 17th. So if you're interested in learning more about that aspect, please come. We need to ensure that our community remains fully in support of the individual's right to choose, absolutely no matter what, no questions asked, no judgment whatsoever. This is easier said than done. Even I, the person that is literally trying to push this reproductive justice initiative at Live Oak, I struggle with abortion stigma. And I'd also like to talk to you about the aspect of racial justice. So this is another team that is kind of in the exploratory stage. So if you're interested in addressing anti-racism and anti-oppression, both in our church community and the Williamson County community at large, please reach out to Wayne Gregory. Now that we have a better understanding of the reproductive justice framework, I'd like to touch on something that I've kind of already talked around, and it's something called intersectionality. So the literal definition of intersectionality is that it's an analytical framework for understanding how aspects of a person's social and political identities combine to create different modes of discrimination and privilege. This term was coined in 1989, but has become a very important aspect of how a lot of political theory is seen in modern day. So in every aspect of social justice our team has spoken about today, it's crucial to remember how race, class, and other identities really affect these. And when we focus on these marginalized communities, we actually tend to improve everyone's situations across the board. Joel talked today about the importance of being involved with education and school boards and local government. With the state of Leander ISD, plus Abbott's recent order affecting trans students, it's very easy to see how these marginalized communities are specifically being targeted in Texas. When we get involved in school board meetings and we're voting, and even whenever we're just forming opinions in general on public education, it's important to make sure intersectionality is really at the heart of what we're talking about. Policies that work to specifically uplift and support kids of color and LGBTQIA plus students benefit absolutely everyone. And I think Round Rock ISD actually kind of made a statement very similar to that in the last week. Chris talked to us today about environmental justice. So how do we bring intersectionality into this? She kind of touched on this, but there are a few things to keep in mind. One is that white suburban communities tend to have better waste management and less pollution if you're looking at it from a health aspect. This is because of how local tax funds are allocated thanks to gerrymandering. Gentrification can also push communities of color into less environmentally safe homes. And as climate change continues to worsen, scientists predict that poor communities of color will suffer the most and will suffer sooner than more privileged communities. So working to save these communities, again, will benefit absolutely everyone. Judy spoke to us today about voting rights. As most of us know, Texas has a pretty horrible track record whenever it comes to implementing unconstitutional voting laws that specifically target people of color, disabled people, poor people, and elderly people. By continuing to lobby for fair voting laws, we can push things in the right direction. If you'd like to take things a step further, consider becoming a VDR, which is a voter deputy registrar. You actually get to register people to vote in your county, and it's really cool. Or even just being a poll worker on election day or for early voting. These will give you the opportunity to specifically work with these marginalized communities and make sure that they are receiving equitable access to the electoral process. And finally, I spoke to you today about reproductive justice. Black people in Texas have the highest maternal mortality rate in the country. Working to specifically improve the health policies, medical practices, poverty alleviation, and sex education for this community, again, winds up improving the lives of everyone. So thank you for being part of this church that is committed to ensuring justice in our community. If you have any questions about any of the topics we've talked about today, please stick around to talk to any of us. We'll be available for the entire religious education hour, or attend one of the social justice ministry meetings. And if you have any questions about that, you can reach out to any of us or Wayne. We'd love to get you involved.
Wow, we have a lot to think about. I've got a few words here while we have a moment of silence and do a little meditating. Holy One, praise be for our connection. Praise be for letters filled with the emotions of the other. Help us to learn from each other. May we have courage and determination to journey together, bridging our gaps with a smile. And this was written by an anonymous UU who is active in the prison reform. Now, if you will, please rise and body your spirit for our closing hymn, number 118, This Little Light of Mine. Light of Mine.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
Good morning. I'm going to take this time to invite you to religious education this morning at 11 a.m. All of our K through 7th graders will be meeting with Carl and Harmony right outside at the picnic tables, and you'll be discussing the 7th principle and actions you can take for the environment. And for our high school youth and for adults, the lovely folks on stage behind me today, along with the rest of the social justice ministry team, will be in room 105 to talk to you about their work. If you were inspired by what you heard today, which I certainly did, I assume the rest of you were as well. You can talk to them about how to get involved, some of the work that they're doing, plans that they have. And so we will see you at 11 o'clock. Thank you.
Now we will have our chalice extinguishing. We extinguish this flame, but we recommit anew to carrying into our week the flame of justice and love. May we share with others the courage and strength that we find here.